Welcome to the Power Forward Pod, hosted by the Power Forward Group Financial Advisory Team, where we believe two is better than one, dialogues are better than monologues, thoughts are meant to be challenged, sound boxes are the enemy, and change is the only constant. Today, we're joined by Power Forward Group Advisor, Chris DeVito. Chris has got a background, as many of you know, working out of a boiler room and had a more holistic planning. And our special guest, who's going to join us today and take us a walk through the last 3 decades of the financial advisory world, Scott Francis. Scott has spent 3 decades in our world. He began his career at a regional company, moved to a national carrier to expand his offerings to his clients. From there, he moved to management to support advisory groups such as our own. Scott is a friend, he's a mentor, and really, frankly, he's the guy who just fixes things as they come up. He's like whack-a-mole. We got a problem, you call Scott. Scott's got it. He's got it handled. Scott works for the 1847 Group, and they support advisory teams like ourselves. So I'm excited to talk to you today. Welcome to the podcast.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you. Happy to be here.
How do you like your new cup? I'm
liking the new cup.
Yeah?
It's good work.
All right. Well, we're only drinking coffee out of our cups because it's 2 p.m. We're getting rolling. So, Scott, you started your career when?
Started 2002.
2002. And why finance?
Good question. So, out of high school, went to community college, took a part-time job at night, and I was the guy who would call people cold in the middle of the night, asking them to come to a seminar.
I'm a little afraid of you. In the middle of the night?
In the middle of the night. Yeah, we worked from 5:30 to 9.
Oh, so you're the guy who interrupted family dinners every
100%,
night.
every single night. In fact, I could go on and on for hours about stories of people saying to me, I'm in the middle of eating dinner. How dare you call me at 6:30? You make a note, call them back tomorrow at 7.
Just come right back at it.
That's it. So, kind of fell into it that way. Was working part-time over the summer. They had a job open up in their operations office full-time, came to me and said, hey, you want a full-time job? And, easy enough. I said, sure. Started working back there, doing deposit slips. Back in the day, people used to pay by check. Some do now, but most don't. Everything's electronic. But back then, we were filling out deposit slips and got into a bunch of different areas over the next 2 years. And, that's how I got in.
So, Chris, kind of similar to your background a little bit, right? Hitting the phones hard at the beginning of your career, finding the end client.
Yeah, I wasn't calling during dinner time because I would just go West Coast.
Oh,
so
moving across the country.
Yeah, time zones.
Yeah, worst brush off you ever got?
Worst brush off. Actually, there's one guy I always remember. It wasn't really a brush up. It was great. The guy, when I cold called him, he'll like this, Scott. He was like, oh, yeah, Chris DeVito. Yeah, we used to go to college together. I totally remember. Yes, I got to talk to you later, and hung up on me. That's great.
Yeah, some good ones.
Ivy League only. What do you got, Scott? What's the best or worst brush off?
Nah, I mean, expletives, right? Yeah. I mean, things that you wouldn't believe that probably aren't appropriate for here, but run the gamut, right? People who literally said, I can't believe you're calling me right now. I just inherited $700,000. Send somebody over tomorrow.
Wow.
True story. And all the way down to, don't ever bleepity bleep this house
I hope
again.
You don't wake up in the morning.
Yeah. What do you think you're doing? And then the funny ones like, oh my God, are you cold calling me? Yes, I am.
Coming right at it.
Coming right at it.
Right. So I think it's fair to say that the industry has changed quite a bit in the last 3 decades. From an advisory point of view, what was the beginning of your career like? How'd you educate yourself? How'd you learn to serve your clients?
So interesting. So the first thing I did after the operations role, I was in ops for a couple of years. They had an opportunity to work as an assistant to a guy who was running the company. Great guy. I learned a ton from him. In addition to running the sales side of that company, he had a client book.
Right.
So part of the job requirement of me moving in and working with him was to get licensed. So Series 7 at the time 63, right? And we'll talk about the evolution there as time went on. 763 life and health. And started doing that. I was more interested in the client side at that point. So I went back to him and said, hey, we have our 9 to 5 gig here doing all this stuff, helping with marketing, the company, and the operations side of the company, working with the sales guys. But we should get out and see all these clients.
Right.
And he said he got excited. This guy was in his early 60s at the time, kind of caught his second wind through me. And we went out and we were driving around every night. I had him out 2-3 appointments a night. And, from there developed, okay, what do you do when you meet with a client? Like, how do you get to learn about them? How do they learn about what you're doing and see if it's a good fit?
So you walk in, you're sitting around the dining room table.
Dining room table every time.
Early in my career, I forgot who taught us, but they were telling us about your first meeting with a client. When you come to the house, the trainer said, "Hey, if they offer you a cup of coffee or if they offer you water, say no." And I never really understood that. Do you say yes? Do you say no?
So I was taught the opposite.
Okay.
The exact opposite. Mine was so much stronger than that. It was demand a cup of coffee, because once they do something for you, then they feel indebted to you, right? And that was like, you could do those crazy psychology games all day long. I don't know if any of it's true.
That's the point, right? Think about that. It's like that's financial advisory training 101 at the beginning of your career. It's like, how do you come in and sit in somebody's house and take assertive control, add value?
Big time.
I remember hearing the handshake thing too, right? What's the dominant handshake, supposedly?
Yeah, dominant handshake. You could do, I was taught always have your go-to comment, because you're meeting someone for the first time in person typically, right? When we were in cold calling, and then going to the house. So mine was the weather, right? You could always talk about the weather no matter what's going on.
Always there.
Can you believe how hot it is? Can you believe it's snowing? Can you believe it's raining? So every meeting I went on, for a first meeting, I would comment on the weather, and it just, kind of people feel at ease. Yeah.
So like the earthquake we had in New York last week,
that would have been a good one.
That's like a month of
that would have been a good one.
Right
Yeah.
there?
I would use that for a while. and then from there, right, where are you going?
Right.
Table. So I've had multiple times where people have said, come sit down on the couch and be nice and relaxed. Nope, I need a table.
Right.
And, I've been in a few standoffs where people are like, no, I want to sit on the couch. I'm like, no, we're going to a table. And, so we've had some fun with that stuff.
What was it like? Was it hard for you to kind of make that shift from like being in cold call mode to like now you're actually meeting like a real person?
It's an interesting thing. At the time, I was young.
Yeah.
Didn't bother me at all. I was able to turn that off, meaning I don't know this person at all. I called them, and now I'm in a position where they're going to be trusting me with, hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of dollars, right? Yep. So that was something that in my early days didn't affect me at all. As I got older and got more experienced, I started to think about that a little bit more. How does this work, right? What am I doing that is going to help me with this person, being that I reached out to them out of the blue, right?
Well, isn't that super interesting, right? Your entry to the industry, and I think for a lot of advisors, is how do you meet a client, right? That's step one. It's not necessarily oftentimes what value you add into the client. It's how do I meet the client? How do I create a dominant handshake, which is uncomfortable for a lot of people? Or how do I confirm they're going to sit at the dining room table and not on the couch, or say no to a cup of water, to where am I adding value now that I'm sitting around the table? So when you began your career, where was the value? How did you learn what the value was, and what were you providing?
So in the beginning, I think what happens is you almost find your niche, and that could be good and that could be bad. Okay. So what I mean is I was in fixed income, right? So we were working with income paying investments. We typically stayed away from the stock market. So what happens there is you now have to start segmenting the population in terms of who you're going to work with. If I'm prospecting 30-year-olds and moving their retirement money and putting it in fixed income, odds are I'm not doing the right thing for them.
Wait, so why were you in fixed income? Like, is that because it's something you enjoyed? Like, or why was that?
That was the company I worked for. So the philosophy of the company, and I think as we go through this, we'll talk about where I went and kind of how things changed along the line. But the company I worked for was a fixed income company. Now we did everything, right? We had mutual funds that were designed for growth, but the mission statement and the philosophy, right? The philosophy is the word of the company was conservative, right? And the good thing there, and I was there for a long time. I spent, I think, about 13 years there. That's where I learned a lot about the business. I have a lot of respect for those guys. They didn't hide it, right? They said, this is what we are. We're going to come out. We're going to tell you we are fixed income. We are conservative. If that's where you want to be, we're the right people for you. So, that's where you start working with the right people. So
then as an advisor, you decide who that right person is to make sure they're fitting your bread and butter.
Yeah, who you're going to prospect. And then it becomes, I think the laws of nature kind of balance that out, right? If I'm talking about fixed income, I'm going to gravitate towards people who are a little bit older, closer to retirement, don't want to associate themselves with high-risk portfolios and things like that. What happened, the transition for me from there to the second company that I went to was that dynamic, right? Not wanting to only be a fixed income advisor. As you meet people, you get introduced to their kids, you get introduced to their friends, their family, and your demographics start to change. So what am I offering the 30-year-old? What am I offering for someone who just had children? We weren't writing a lot of insurance, so we weren't really doing the holistic financial planning. So that was the trigger that moved me from company one to company two.
So on a personal level, you kind of realize your toolbox is limited.
100%.
You're sitting in front of an end client and you say, sure, we're great at this. I can't really solve that need. And you as an advisor say, but I want to do more. I mean, Chris has spoken about this a lot, and this is what I love about our industry. I can walk on Park Avenue, take the elevator down. The guy walking the dog or the guy wearing, a bougie Patagucci vest like mine, right? They all need services from a financial advisor, right? They're all prospective clients. They all have different needs. How big is that toolbox? Where are we making that difference, right? You spoke about that early in your career a ton.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I felt, what I was doing was very pigeonholed, right? It was stocks, and that was it. It was kind of the reverse of what you were doing, right? It was more of the high risk, the quote unquote, taking big shots and stuff like that for clients. And we didn't do any of that. More of a holistic plan. I'm curious to hear from you, Scott. Like, what was the year where you sort of see? Was it more of an industry shift that you started to see, where clients were looking for kind of figuring out how different pieces fit in?
Yeah, it was a huge. You're talking the company that I worked for first. You're in say 2003 all the way up through 2011 when I was in sales. No email. We didn't communicate with clients via email. We couldn't. Right. That's imagine that today. Right. In addition to that, no managed money.
Wait, so
right?
somebody
so
10 years from now is going to be like, I can talk to my clients via text message?
That's right.
Coming?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Who saw the internet coming, right? We have that story.
Out of nowhere.
But, you're also talking about advisory platforms, right? So multiple fund carriers in the same portfolio, right? And how do you navigate that in a commission world, right? You can't. Right. So those types of things were, you're looking at it and saying, at the time I'm in my early 30s and I'm saying, wow, am I just going to stick with fixed income? Now you can. People did. And that's great. Right. Like if you don't want to be challenged. Right. But the position that I took was as the world evolves, as financial planning evolves, and you start looking at other variables like estate planning and tax law changes and all these different things, you have to really dedicate yourself to that education. Otherwise, you're always going to be a niche advisor, right? And that was where I said at the time, I want to be part of the big team. I want to be part of the holistic where I can solve all the problems. And I think, as we talk, somewhere inside me all along was I want to be a problem solver.
Okay,
right?
so that's the why, right? That's what made you feel good as a person?
Yep, big time. So, now we're working going into 2011, we're at a holistic company, financial planning, all the stuff is there. Get a couple of additional licenses, right, which is important. Licensing is another thing that I'm big on, right, making sure that advisors have the licenses that they need if they're recommending products. So doing all that, and then ultimately coming to the conclusion that the people I want to help are not the general public, it's the people that I'm sitting next to. Right.
Why did that evolution happen? Was that a life, like in Scott Francis family evolution, or was that a Scott Francis, I want to change my career path evolution?
It's probably a little bit of both. I think circumstance and I guess you could say things happen for a reason, right? So I'm working, my company gets bought by another, competitor.
Right.
They come in and they say, okay, we're still going to allow you to do whatever you want, but this is what we do. So now I'm like
a little bit of a
regressing back.
You went backwards, right?
Yeah.
It's a circle.
So now in my mind, I'm regressing back to company one. In essence, it's a different viewpoint and a different set of products. But ultimately, the big entity is saying to me, you came here to be more holistic, but now, even though you can, here's what we want you to do. And at that point, I said, this is not for me.
Right.
So I went independent. Right, completely independent. Now I have no one telling me what to do. And then the phone rings, and it's my old manager from, the second company I was at. Hey, let's get into leadership together. I have an opportunity. I think we'd be great. And there was the leap of faith on my part saying, hey, let's make a little career shift here. I had been working with the public for 15 years. It was great. But you get an opportunity, and something just in my DNA was like, this could be cool. Let's give this a shot. Let's start working with the people that I used to be, right? And then we end up here.
So that manager, right? Michael Caine, not Sir Michael Caine, right? Somebody we all
Doctor.
know, right?
Dr. Caine.
Dr. Caine. we'll call him?
United still.
Right. It's coming now, right? OBE. When you made that shift in your career, was it about the people you were working with and kind of supporting you? Did you have that previously? Was it following them, or was it really just saying, hey, I'm going to get more out of this on a personal side?
Both.
Yeah.
I think, for me personally, it was, I've learned so much in the years that I was in the industry, 13 years up until maybe more up until that point. I felt like I had a lot to give. Now, it's interesting. It didn't pan out that way. Here we are 7 years later, and my knowledge and my wisdom that I thought I had from day one is not what I'm doing right now. Right? I thought it would be, and that was what got me excited. But as we came in here, we looked at the old administration, for lack of a better word, was heavy on bring them in from college, right? Bring them in inexperienced. And I had experience with that. My first company, that's all we did.
And that's kind of where you came from, right?
That's where
I came from. You survived that, but I think that's a lot of people die in that system.
100%. And you realize that even if you make it through that, it's a gauntlet that you come out and you're not the same. So some of your personal relationships suffer, right? Your work-life balance is awful, right? Unless you have a natural market of people that are just waiting for you. But if you're out there, if you're cold calling and you're prospecting and you're having to do all that stuff, getting into this industry, you make it through, your personal life suffers. There's no doubt about it. Now, we can go off on all these different tangents, but we'll come back to maybe teaming. And that's where having a team and bringing people onto a team eliminates a lot of that front end stress and grind and helps people come into this business a lot easier. But going back to me coming over here, we had 16 people left from, don't quote me on this, but I think it was a 30-person class or something like that.
That's high.
Right? And so 30 people get hired. A year later, there's 16 left. We work with the 16. We end up with 4 after the first year. And that's the attrition rate on new people at the history of what we were doing.
Chris, when you began your career, like how many people do you know that you started with are still in finance?
Still in it? Maybe I could count them on one hand.
Yeah.
It's tough. Yeah. It's tough. And you think about going back to me in that first dynamic, I'm brand new to the industry. Why would anyone trust me to be their advisor if I don't have someone sitting next to me that's got experience, right? And teaming eliminates that.
When I first got started, I remember I was talking to a family friend who's a very successful guy at UBS, and I was like, "What's the key to success?" He's like, "Just survive." Right? It's like just stay in the industry. People are going to fall off. You're going to inherit clients and stuff like that. And I remember reading one time like the failure rate in our business is like over 95% of advisors don't last, right? But the success rate of people coming into a family operated business is basically 100%, right? So I think it comes back to our industry is certainly very competitive, right? It's hard. That's for sure, but sometimes there's sharp elbows. So I think what you're talking about with teaming and things like that is a huge advantage because it allows you to, have some, I don't call it a safety net, but you have that support that you don't always have.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, like from you, from shifting from kind of serving clients to serving now advisors, like what was the biggest mindset shift for you?
The big thing was the day, right? Yeah. So I've told this story at leadership meetings. I've told this story in front of other advisors. The day was we had a coach, and I came in, we call it hot, right? We've joked about this. I came in hot, and I wanted to tell everyone where I've been, what I've done, how that was successful, and do it like me, because I perceived that was my job, right? That was management. Show them the way, and they will follow. And in retrospect, that was probably the worst way to approach it. So I had a coach. I'm meeting with her, and I'm saying to her, it's going well, but I'm butting heads with a few people, and I don't understand why. And
I mean, you could be honest. Yeah. Scott and I,
we were killing each other, right? There was always, I remember vividly, 7 years ago, I remember thinking, I really like this guy, and I think he likes me. But every time we talk about business, we fight. When we don't talk about business, it's amazing, right? But the truth of the matter is, what I learned was, and she had said to me, a lot of people who are successful don't need you to tell them what to do. They just need you to be there to support them. And, she could see in my face, I was like, it was my moment. And she said, just think about that and approach things differently. And, I went home that night and looked in the mirror for a while. It was like 40 minutes. And I just kept saying to myself, like, you've made this decision on your own, and it's about support now.
Right.
And that was where, then every day, like, I wake up and I look at it and I say, I have an opportunity to help the advisors grow their business by making sure that their problems are eliminated. And you have to be that kind of person. Dana White, who runs the UFC, made a great video, and he talked about, I enjoy waking up and going to work every day because I love solving problems.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. And when I saw him say that, I was like, all right, that's kind of cool because I feel that way too. And you see that level of success building an organization, and I kind of use that as a parallel, but that's the message.
Your why hasn't changed, right? It's you've gone from the end client to the advisory client, but you're still helping them add value to the career. I think to what both you guys said about the beginning of your careers in finance and kind of the evolution, I straddled both worlds, right? My dad was at New York Life, a big insurance carrier, and he said, I went from the legal world to his world. And when I came in, there was a class of 30, right? And every month there was a class of 30, right? So I can't do math, but there's a lot of people, right? And most of them didn't survive. The insurance company, sure, they made a lot of money off that class of 30 every single month, but most of them didn't survive. And to Chris's point, and what was that guy at UBS?
UBS,
right?
Yeah.
UBS, right? Survival of the fittest is one end of the spectrum, and I think that is also a 1980s, 1990s, 2000 approach where you'll survive, you'll inherit some accounts, and you'll do really well because you survived, right? You've gotten through those hard nights and those hard days, and everybody around you has failed has allowed you to kind of survive upwards. I think when we think about our end client, I think what I love about the advisory world today and standing on shoulders of people like you, Scott, is that, and my dad, is that we got to look here and say, how do we thrive, right? How do we build out teams and groups of people that can complement each other's skill sets? Chris does math. I hate math. I'll talk about taxes. I'll talk about macroeconomics. You'll talk about leaderships. How do we put ourselves in that position from an advisory perspective and then put our clients in that position? How do we build out that network? So from a leadership side, now that you're in the support role, so to speak, every advisor you deal with, right? Every group, I assume, is different, right? You have different personality types.
Sure.
You spoke about how you take a seat back. What do you see from an end client perspective? What adds value from a teaming approach to the end client perspective?
So you think about everything we just said, right? If you're in that old model, the old school financial services where it's bring them in, get the clients in the door. If they fail, that's fine. We'll pass them to somebody else. What's the end user experience there, right? I have a new rep, right? I had a rep that I trusted, right? But now that rep is gone and I have a new one. And that could happen multiple times. I mean, I've experienced it where you'll see accounts getting assigned every couple of years.
Right.
So what I do and we do, right, when you talk about being at the agency and the bigger company, is we look at it and we say, we view advisors, you guys, as our client, which in turn helps you help your client. Right. So it's downstream and we want everybody to be happy. How do you do that? You have to provide them with the best experience possible. So that could be technology experience. That could be support experience in terms of, I have a problem, I need it fixed. It could be simple as I want to change my beneficiary, get it done quick. Right. Those little things, just tackling little problems, but bigger picture, how do we make sure that you and your clients are having the best experience? It's having the right people and the right number of people, right? If we went out and hired 1,000 people tomorrow, we couldn't serve them properly. So we don't, right? Yeah. We acquire the right people and we make sure that we have the support in place to be able to handle that level of advisor.
So from an end client perspective, I think in some ways the market has gotten smarter. And it's not that people are necessarily smart. I hope we are. That's part of evolution. But I think it's, right, there's so much more choice, right? You came in with a company that said, hey, you're selling fixed income. Chris, you're selling, equities, higher risk products. You're the first person to reach that person on a cold call. Like, you're going to force them around the dining room table. Yeah, they're probably going to end up as your client if you're good at what you do. But are they putting themselves in the best position? And I think when you look at the vertical integration of the industry, it's clients are going to find the right advisor for them. So from our perspective, are we finding the right experience from the advisor? And from Scott, your perspective, are you putting teams and groups and advisory practices in the place to offer that holistic box to clients rather than that, single product entity that one company might want to sell or another company might want to sell?
Yeah, I think so. You look at it, there's different types of companies out there. I don't think I'm saying anything that people don't know. There's captive and there's non-captive, right? It's really that simple. So when you look at it and you say, okay, if my company is telling me this is what we sell, period.
Right.
I don't want to be in that position. I can be, but I don't want to be.
Yeah.
Versus a company that says to me, here's what we have to offer. We feel very confident in it. We will earn, and this is our philosophy, we will earn that business through good product, good support, good leadership. And if you find that you come across a client where we don't fit, not only is it okay to go somewhere else, we'll support you and we'll help you do it.
Right.
And I think that really is the game changer. Anytime you, and I'm going to give an opinion, so let me put that caveat on there. Anytime you start getting into money and compensation, there's a certain level of greed that comes with that. And in our industry, my 22 years, you experience that. The best people stay away from that instinct. Yeah. They stay away from that greed instinct. And that could be from a very high level company perspective to say, how do we invest in our leadership, right? How does the leadership then in turn invest in their advisors? Because that's another big element to it. And then how do the advisors then invest in their clients? And that could be as simple as getting licensed and educated and knowing what's going on in the industry. And when that all comes into play, you have a good situation. And I think that's where, over my pings and pongs through the industry, all four of them, right now I'm in the most comfortable spot I've ever seen, because I feel like that everybody's on the same page up and down the line.
And you're getting your why answered.
Yeah. So question for you now. You've seen plenty of advisors throughout your career. I'm not going to ask you to give me one, so give me two. What are the two most common, I'll say, common personality traits you've seen from advisors that are successful long-term?
That are successful, dedicated, is by far number one. Because even if you're not that talented, if you work hard, you'll grind it out. Yeah. I'm not saying that's ideal by any stretch of the imagination, but dedicated and honestly intelligent, right? It's a very complex, complicated business. And if I pull someone off the street and I say, hey, put together a financial plan for this client, it's dangerous. Yeah. That's dangerous. And we could tell stories all day long about, my Uncle Louie told me I should buy this, right? I remember sitting with people. My Uncle Louie told me I shouldn't do what you're saying. I should do this. All right, well, whatever. I had 10 years experience at the time. Your Uncle Louie, Bitcoin, right? What does Uncle Louie do, right? Uncle Louie, whatever Uncle Louie does, he's not a financial advisor. So and you'll know, right? Like intuitively, when someone's talking to you, you know if they know what they're talking about or if they're just giving you a bag of cement, right? And I think that's really important for the consumer.
Yeah, so from a dedication perspective, you have a jersey that hangs in your office. You walk in the office, you see that jersey. You want to tell us about that? That spoke to me when I first met you. I said, wow, this guy's got some mentors, and the mentors are important to him.
Yeah, you're talking about Tillman?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, you think about sacrifice, and, there's people that sacrifice all the time. Right. And every, we'll talk about the military. Every member of the military is just as important as the next person in line. That being said, you look at a guy like Pat Tillman who said, and it wasn't even going into the military and fighting in the war. What happened in his life prior to that, he was drafted by the Arizona Cardinals. He had an opportunity to leave the Cardinals and go to the Seahawks for a much higher contract. He turned it down.
Right.
And he said, I'm staying with the Cardinals because they believed in me. Now, where does that happen?
Right.
Right. And that, I started to learn about that guy, and I was just like, this is a guy who was making millions, riding his bicycle to work. That's cool. Right. To the stadium. And they showed his bicycle in the parking lot next to all the cars and SUVs and everything. And, and this is, now you come to our industry, there's so many generalizations that you can say, but when you find the person in our industry that has that level of humility, that's the kind of person you want to be around. Because again, I could really have fun. I could sit with you guys for 7 hours telling you stories. Specifically, I remember a woman saying to me, the reason I work with you is because you don't have the Mercedes and the pinky ring. She was very specifically referencing the guy she was working with who would show up.
Was he Italian?
Yeah, he would show up to her house in a high-end Mercedes with a huge diamond pinky ring. And, it's a woman who was a nurse that made $75,000 a year. And I treated her like she was a really important person because that's what you do.
And she is an important person.
Yeah. And that's what you do. That's how you treat people. And then you parallel that back to a guy like Pat Tillman, who just knew how to treat people. Everybody liked them. You go around, everybody liked them. And wherever I find things like that, I put them up on a wall. I try to write it down somewhere to keep that. Always want to keep that center of mind.
Anybody in your life like that, Chris?
That I can think of. Come back to me in a minute. Think through that.
All right, we'll come back to you. Well, I know you want to talk about PFG After Hours before we wrap up. So I don't know what that means. It's a little scary as we drink coffee out of these beautiful mugs. PFG After Hours. It is, by the way, 3 in the afternoon.
Yes, this is going to be our first segment where we finish with this, Scott. So you're breaking the ice here. So PFG After Hours, just anything like a new hobby, a show, a restaurant you're checking out, a book you're reading, something that's kind of like you're into right now. It's got your attention.
For me?
Yeah.
Wow. I just started a 900-page book on Abraham Lincoln.
How far are you?
20. Just started it. I'm doing the presidents in order.
Okay.
And I'm at Lincoln, and Lincoln had a lot of stories. So 900 pages versus James Buchanan, who was before him, who was 130 pages. Not much to say about James Buchanan.
Some say he might be the worst president ever.
That's the title of the book I read. James Buchanan, worst president ever.
Yeah. You get me started. Interesting time. Interesting time.
Yeah.
And both had interesting home scenarios. How about you, Chris?
I haven't dove into this one just yet, but it's been highly recommended, and it's on the list. That Nickelodeon documentary.
Oh, what's that called again?
A Quiet on Set.
Okay.
I think it's called. So got a long plane ride coming up with the missus and the kids. So if we catch the kids catch some Z's, I'll watch a couple episodes. Check it out.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of seriousness in our lives, and that's one.
That's why I haven't watched it.
That's one I'm going to avoid for a while. I think just by reading the paper, I think I've gotten the headline, and I think I'm good with that. I've been rewatching The Wire, which is I think it's been 20 years or some subset of years since The Wire. Just did season 2, and all of it takes place down by the Baltimore dockyards, right by the bridge that went down a couple of weeks ago. So
I had 42 text messages that day.
That's crazy.
Yeah, Scott Francis.
We've had
Francis Scott Key Bridge. Million, like text after text. Your bridge just fell.
That's nuts. So we've had an earthquake. We had a bridge fall.
We had 2 earthquakes.
Aftershocks, but.
It's a couple hours later. Is that still an aftershock?
I totally missed it, by the way. That's in Nashville. I miss all the fun. But we had an earthquake. We had a bridge fall. We had an eclipse. It's been an interesting time in the world.
Busy week.
Does that affect the stock market at all, by the way? Keeps trucking.
Could. What does affect?
Keeps trucking. Well, glad to have you. We'll have more of Scott Francis. One last story. Tell us about the internet.
Tell us about the internet. Who saw that coming?
Who saw that coming?
Who saw that? So tell the story. So we had a real good guy in our office. I loved him. I mean, I still do, right? He's still around, but
he's a giant in the industry, right? I'm standing on your shoulders. He's probably been in the industry since the 50s.
Great guy. And the story is we were all huddled around the office one day, and he's on the phone. He had the door open, and he's talking. And he says, look at what we were doing in the industry and back in 2000 or whatever. And then the internet came. Who saw that thing coming? And that was probably the single greatest line I've ever heard.
A couple of non-PG words.
That was hysterical. But think about it. Make that real. When I started, we weren't using it. Yeah. Right? We had a Bloomberg machine in front of the office if you wanted to get your information.
What's the next internet in our industry?
Now we have AI. Currency that's not real currency, right? That's electronic money. Who knows? So it'll be interesting to see where we are 20 years from now.
Yeah, can't wait. Looking forward, and let's keep powering forward together.
All right.
Thank you, guys.